Yeah. So since we last spoke, this was coming out. It hadn't come
Hmm.
out yet. And we did talk a little bit about making it, so we don't have to go through all that again. But because on the uh, last conversation, you talked about going in the studio with these guys and making the record. But since then, I've had a chance to listen to this many times. This is a fantastic sounding album, and of course,
Thank you.
um, this is one of those I would call it a modern classic. You know, this is
Thank you.
so when you listen to something like this, and here I was having an interesting conversation with someone the other day, and talking about how records, whether it's jazz or any other genre, that everything has to sound too perfect nowadays. In other words, you've got all the ability to go in and edit things. Of
Yeah.
course, you couldn't edit anything on this. I think there's something to be said for jazz music that it's real people playing real instruments. But you do hear if albums, modern jazz albums that are overproduced, and you can tell uh, that they were edited, or that there was too much done to make it sound too perfect. So talk a little bit about that, because I think there's something to be said about, you get a record like this that they just did a reissue of this Sunny Side Up, right? Verb, you got Sunny Stitt on here. Uh, you can hear the reed, sometimes it cracks. Sometimes there's a little imp in it, but it makes it sound what it is. Talk a little bit about that, the overproducing things that we're seeing now in music.
Yeah. Now, I wasn't around. Obviously, I wasn't around in those days. I'm venturing to guess that given the times, that some of those musicians, some of our heroes, were less picky about how they sounded. They just wanted to get their money and get the hell out. I'm not suggesting that they didn't care. That's not what I mean. And I would love for somebody to hear this and tell me I was wrong. I think the perfection thing came later. And I don't know when, where, or how, or why it started. Perhaps it started because the technology changed and you could edit and you could try to make it sound perfect. For myself personally, I'm an imperfect player. And I'm sure that if you ask Chris Potter or Christian McBride, or they would also say they're imperfect. But what I mean by that is I play with a lot of passion, and I play with a lot of, like, I go all in. And because of that, sometimes it's imperfect. And a really good friend of mine who's recorded on the label before, a great saxophone player named Steve Caldestad, when I was making a record, I was upset with something and I really, really wanted desperately to fix it. And he said, well, if you fix that part, it's just going to be displaced to another part. So you're going to fix that, but you're going to go over here and it was very enlightening for me. And like when I listen to somebody, for example, like Clifford Brown, like he's perfect.
Yeah,
I mean,
well,
I don't think you ever heard a recorded song or solo by him in his studio records that was anything less than 100% precision perfection. You listen to Lee Morgan, and I want to be very clear about this. I am not criticizing Lee, and I'm not criticizing Clifford. Lee Morgan was a little less perfect, equally as amazing. And in fact, I sort of prefer the listening experience of Lee Morgan a little more for that reason. You hear the cacks and the things that maybe a modern day trumpeter might go in and try to redo. So I think you have to be really careful. I mean, I think it matters like what kind of record you're trying to make. Like you take the Rin Seo record, for example, the desire to be more perfect on a record like that might be greater because there's more involved. There's definitely more involved. Um, so it's more involved. Whereas the Cory Weeds quartet record, I mean, essentially we're just blowing, we're just playing tunes. So, if you screw up a head, that's one thing. But if you play something you didn't like in your solo, is it really worth, is it really worth going back to fix? That's what you have to ask yourself. Like, is it really worth it? And generally for me, if I'm in the studio, first of all, when I'm in the studio, I always have somebody there telling me, like, let's say, you're going to tell me whether I need to do it again or move on. But if there's something I really don't like, I'm like, no, 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 I'm gonna fix that. The other thing is that, look, the honest truth about it is that Eric Alexander and Seamus Blake and Grant Stewart and Chris Potter are not going to be buying my records. They're just not, and chances are they're probably not going to be listening to them either. If we're being really honest about it, It's the person that comes to the club that night that has a great time that really wants to buy my record, and they're not going to know the difference. So I'm not suggesting that means I shouldn't care. That's not what I'm getting at. But you see my point. You can get too micro about stuff, and I think it ruins the spirit.